What do we see in this screen? This is our data source screen, because of course, before we jump into creating visualizations, it's quite important that our data is on point. If there's a mistake in our data, every single data visualization will also be wrong. That's why it's crucial to first double check everything we are doing at this level. On the left side, you'll see the name of our connection and the type of connection it is at this point. As we know, it's an Excel file. Tableau will show you all of the sheets that are available in this Excel file. In this case, orders, people, and returns. And of course, because it's an Excel file, it shows it as the name sheets. From the moment you connect to a database, you will have an overview of all of your tables, views, and stored procedures. And it's always possible to create your own SQL, custom SQL statements if it's not contained in the correct table. In the middle of our screen, we'll see in bright orange that Tableau tells us drag sheets here. Most of the things we're going to do in these 2 hours will be drag and drop. Tableau is still a drag and drop tool, self-service, so let's try to keep it simple by dragging the correct data in here. But how do you know what data we have to use? We have 3 sheets here. If you're not really sure, you can also always hover over the name of your sheets and see this little icon on the right of it called View Data. By clicking on View Data, Tableau will give you an overview of what's in that sheet. That could be quite useful if you're not really sure which of the sheets you should use. Normally, Tableau shows you 10,000 rows, or also it's called records, of what's in there. Our Excel file only contains 9,994 rows. That's why you only see this amount. Normally, it's 10,000. This looks good. So let's use this one and just drag it to the location where it says drag sheets here. Tableau by default will show you all of the available columns that are within this sheet, or within this, sheet is okay, within the sheet, and he will try to assign the correct data type to every single column. As you can see, there are dates in here, there are strings, there are integers, so number values. You have these small globe icons. That means it's geographical data. Of course, Tableau does this on this sample superstore data, and this sample superstore data is the most perfect demo data there is. So everything is going to run really smoothly. Of course, that's not always going to be the case. So it's always possible to click on the data type and change it accordingly to what's correct. What else do we see? We see the top 1,000 records we have to make sure that everything that we are looking for is correct and correctly assigned. This is overview number 1, but let's say that I want to change my order date. I can always double click on the title and change it to something else. For example, I make this mistake. I call it date. I create my visualizations, I create my dashboards, and in a few weeks or in a few months, one of my colleagues has to continue my work. But they don't know, what does date mean? What was the original name of this column? That's why we have this second overview here on the left, next to our overview that we've chosen right now. We have the overview that's called Manage Metadata. By clicking on the Manage Metadata, you'll see that on the left side, we see the name of the columns we have chosen. So I've renamed it to date. On the right side, you'll always see the original name that the column has got in the original Excel file. So that could be a useful overview to come back to in case the renaming didn't happen according to best practices. I'm going to go back to my first overview, double click and rename it order date. A few other things we can do here is by hovering over the columns of one of your available fields. We see this little drop-down arrow appearing as well. If you click on that one, there are a few additional options, like creating groups or creating calculated fields. That is for later in these 2 hours. But we also see a split option. This is quite interesting on our order ID field, because it looks that it's divided in 3 parts. The first part seems to be a sort of shortcode of the state in the United States. The middle part seems to be a year, and the last part, the actual order ID. What if I now wanted to use these three columns separately? Well, by clicking on this little drop-down arrow once more, we have the option called Split. Tableau will create three separate columns by looking at the separator that was available in your order ID. It's immediately clear that above these newly created columns, you don't see these blue lines anymore. That's because these columns have been created by ourselves. They are not located in your original Excel file. That's super important to know. Tableau will never write back to your original Excel file. It will never change data in the Excel. It only reads data. All the additional elements we create ourselves are only created in this Tableau file and not in the underlying data source. That means that if I go to my order ID, I can't remove the order ID. I can only hide or rename it. These columns I've created myself, and these I can either rename, but also delete. That's the big difference between columns you create yourself or original columns. We're not really going to use these three separately created columns, so I'm just going to delete them once more to have our original view back. But how often does it happen that all of your data is located in one table? We see you have multiple sheets. So what happens if I drag my next sheet into there as well? Well, Tableau is going to join automatically, and it will look at the same columns that it finds in those two sheets to make sure there's a join. A join looks at the same values across multiple columns to make sure that you have more data available. At this moment, you'll see if I go to the right, you'll now see this person also became available. Briefly, if a join is not super clear, a join will always result in more columns. But for now, I'm going to click on this people field that I dragged in as well, or this people sheet, and I'm going to remove it so we can keep it simple by only using our orders. On top, we can always clean it up a little bit. Superstore orders. We're now sure that we're using the right data. So we should see that in the bottom, we can continue to sheet 1, which is highlighted in orange, to go and create our first visualizations.